Hello and welcome to another video. This week our focus is cosplay and anime. So cosplay is a mixture of costume and roleplay used at conventions worldwide. Anything from something huge like Comic-Con in New York to an anime convention locally here in Charleston. Animes are for all ages, including children's animes, fantasy animes, sports animes, slice of life animes, and is even expanded to Western animation like Disney and cartoons. Our focus this week is going to be the school uniforms from My Hero Academia and Shira from the Netflix original series Shira. The costume we're going to be focusing on today is the summer uniform from My Hero Academia. The summer uniforms are easily thrifted with a white shirt, a pair of pants, and a red tie. So I started by looking for a white shirt. For the male uniform, you will need a pair of khaki pants, which you will dye the correct color. And for the female uniform, you'll need a khaki pleated skirt. You will also need a red tie for each character. Since Deku has a smaller tie, I actually opted to make a tie out of some curtains I found. We're going to begin by dyeing our pants. The first step is going to be to add a cup of vinegar to boiling water. You're going to want to soak your pants and your skirt so that they will evenly absorb the dye. I then added the dye to the pot. I used the polyester dye since I wasn't sure of the fabric content. That's also why we added the vinegar. You can then go ahead and add your two items to the pot, making sure that they're submerged completely so that they will get fully dyed. I also tend to mix mine throughout to make sure that they are fully submerged throughout the process so that they get a nice even dye. After about 10 minutes, you want to take them out and rinse them in cold water until the water runs clear. I sometimes will even put them in the washing machine so they get a nice full wash. Once cleaned, you go ahead and iron it with the iron. I had to make sure the pleats were back in order, and I also did the same for the pants. With our dyeing complete, our costume is already about halfway done. Since most collared shirts come with a pocket, I chose to seam rip mine off because the uniforms in the show do not have a front pocket. For the epaulets, I used a piece of fabric that I also dyed in my lot. I cut a small rectangle for each side, and then I ironed it to the correct size and used stitch witchery to keep it from coming undone. Once that was finished, I placed them where I wanted them, tacked them in place with a pin, and hand sewed it in place. I found 4 matching buttons for the gold buttons on the top of the epaulets and stitched those in place as well. And with that, your My Hero Academia costumes are complete. If you want, you can add a belt. Some characters have a black or brown belt. Otherwise, most characters have about the same uniform. Here's a look at our female school uniform completed. And here's a look at our male school uniform completed. The great thing is you can be just about any character, just add the wig that works for you. This includes the teachers because a lot of the UA teachers also went to school there. Since Deku has specific shoes, I used a pair of red shoes I already owned, but you can paint a pair of shoes just like we did last week. All the other characters wear loafers or some other kind of professional looking shoe, so just about any shoe at Goodwill will work for this costume. And there we have our completed school uniforms. This is one of the most popular animes right now, so this is a great and easy costume to put together, and it's a great group costume to put together with your friends. Now to move on to our Shira costume. To break it down, she has a white turtleneck shirt and shorts. She also has a red cape and a headpiece and a sword. I started by finding a white sweater turtleneck at Goodwill. I then found a couple of pairs of shorts and tried them on to find the one that's going to give me the best fit. In the bedding section, I found some curtains to use for the skirted part of my outfit. I also looked for the cape material. I was torn between bed sheets and a blanket, but I liked the flow better of this blanket. I also found a pair of tan boots that I will paint to be my Shira boots. I started by cutting the sleeves off of it and pinning it to where I wanted the sleeves to start. I also pinned the shirt about where I wanted the V to happen on the shirt. I then came in and glued a strip of vinyl to each side of my pants. You will need some sort of gold material, whether it's spandex or vinyl. I chose vinyl because that's what I already had in my house. There is a little bit of drying time for E6000, but once it's dried, it does have a strong hold. And please make sure to use it in a well-ventilated area. I then cut out a stencil for the centerpiece of the shirt. It took me a couple of tries, but I finally found one that I was happy with. I then laid my stencil on top of my vinyl, and I traced out the design I would need, including the turtleneck part, a line down the center, and I chose to put the belt part on there as well, so it's all one piece. I then glued the piece of vinyl in place on the shirt. I only glued the collar part about halfway so I can still fit my head through the neck, and I did not glue down the bottom piece yet. I cut the excess fabric off of the shirt, leaving the V where I need it to be on it. I cut 3 skirt shapes out of the curtains, and I sewed them together using my serger, but you can use stitch witchery, hot glue, or you can use a regular sewing machine for it. Once everything was stitched together, I used the stitch witchery to create a hemline on the bottom of the skirt. I then hand gathered the skirt. You just do a very long running stitch throughout everything, and then it gathers together perfectly like that. Here is it finished with the gathers. I then pinned that to the shirt and hand sewed that in place as well using a running stitch. With that in place, the last thing to do is to glue down the vinyl V part of it on top of where the gathered stitch is. I only did it about halfway so that I could cinch the waist where I needed it to be. While it dried, I used pins to keep it in place so that it would dry flat on the garment. I then added a gem to the middle. Once that was completed, I cut out 4 identical pieces for the sleeves, hot glued them together, and E6000 them in place on the shirt. For the cape, I gathered the blanket on the top and pinned it in place on top of the garment. I thought it was funny that there was a delta in there, so thankfully the gathers covered that. I then spray painted my shoes with a spray paint that was meant for fabrics. I acrylic painted the rest of the designs on according to a couple of pictures that I found online. For the gauntlets, I just cut out simple shapes and added some Velcro to them. At this time, I also added Velcro to the back of the belt and the back of the neck piece. For the tiara, I used a piece of floral wire and I cut the vinyl in shape. I then sandwiched it using hot glue, and I added a small piece of fishing line that is going to hold our gem. As you can see, it's pretty moldable, which is great. I then hot glued the gem in place on top of the fishing wire so it looks like it's floating. I added combs to it to keep it in place while wearing, and cut out the wings from vinyl and added them in place using hot glue to my tiara. I added detailing to the tiara with fabric glue. And there is our completed outfit for Shira. I also opted to make the sword, which is a major part of her costume. I used a paddle I found at Goodwill, drilled 3 holes in it, and added dowels to keep it in place with the foam, which is a playmat foam I found at Walmart. I used the floor sealant DAP to fill in the holes in it. I used rubber cement to keep everything in place and let everything dry before sanding it down with a hand sander. health purposes, please cover your face while you're doing this because the foam gets everywhere. I then sprayed it all one uniform color and cut out the hilt pieces for it. I glued those in place with rubber cement, cut out the top piece of it, and glued that on top of my side pieces. Once that was finished, I used the DAP to fill in the seams on those as well. I painted everything with a layer of glossy Mod Podge to give it a more full and seamless look altogether so that everything has the same sheen. I crisscross wrapped the hilt of the sword in ribbon and hot glued it in place. I then Mod Podged that as well so that it would have the same sheen and texture as everything else. For the rounded part, I cut a Christmas ornament in half. I then hot glued that in place on either side. I spray painted the top part silver and the bottom part gold. I then used black fabric paint to add the detailing to it, and I spray painted those as well. I added the gem and a little bit of extra detailing, and with that the sword was finished. And here is our completed Shira look, fully worthy of the honor of Grayskull. Thank you so much for tuning in for this tutorial. Next week, tune in for our creepy, kooky Addams Family tutorial.